A respite in the middle of the way defines the space of the fourth mansion. The amount of effort you've put in so far requires that you rest at this point. What lies ahead will present a solid challenge. The fourth mansion is a transitional stage, a time of mixing certain experiences, which can be summed up in the following words: from you to God, from thinking to loving, from meditation to contemplation, from recollection worked out by you to recollection worked out in you by God, from recollection as a means to recollection as a fruit. In the journey to this point, it was you who have been looking for God. From the fourth mansion onwards, it is God himself who seeks you. In the first three mansions, God allowed you to feel your own actions. You were getting to know yourself, struggling with yourself, putting yourself in order, persevering. All that work was your sole responsibility. Now, in the fourth mansion, the onus shifts to God. In this space of rest, you simply experience how good the Lord is. What does this look like in the midst of everyday life? Well, earlier, in various ways you were trying to focus your attention on God. You were looking for his traces around you, reading about him, meditating on his life, trying to direct your thoughts and desires towards God, and endeavouring to see him in other people. Now, God himself provides you with this recollection, meaning that you now see his presence everywhere and notice his action in everything that surrounds you. It is he, God himself, who approaches you and provides you with a deep peace, a time of repose. A decisive change in the life of the person of the fourth mansion can be seen in the manner of prayer, which can be described as moving from a prayer where you work on your recollection before God to a prayer where you allow God to work on a state of recollection within you, or you allow God to embrace you with himself. In other words, you pass from the prayer of the so-called acquired recollection, which is active and natural, to the prayer of recollection, which is a gratuitous gift, supernatural, passive, or mystical, where God himself is the author. To recollect means to get accustomed to staying in the presence of God, as with father, brother, master, bridegroom and friend. In other words, it's about looking for him in every way in the space of prayer. With time, such prayer will be simplified. You simply come to prayer and you don't seek God anymore because he is already present, and you are ready at any moment to throw yourself into his arms whenever they are open. So, now you're in prayer, resting in the space of eternity, giving God complete freedom without any shadow of petitions and expectations. Eventually you begin to understand the purpose of simple staying before God, which is not at all a waste of time. You simply meet God as a person with whom you fall in love. Now, the recollection is no longer a condition for the encounter with God, but its fruit. You simply come to prayer and you don't seek God anymore because he is already present, and you are ready at any moment to throw yourself into his arms whenever they are open. So, now you're in prayer, resting in the space of eternity, giving God complete freedom without any shadow of petitions and expectations. Eventually you begin to understand the purpose of simple staying before God, which is not at all a waste of time. You simply meet God as a person with whom you fall in love. Now, the recollection is no longer a condition for the encounter with God, but its fruit. To better understand it, Theresa gives the example of two basins of water. One of them is supplied with water flowing from a distant source through a system of pipes. The other is filled directly from the spring. God is like this flowing spring within you. He fills your soul from within. You are resting after hard work, and at this time God is introducing order and unity within you. A conscious supernatural life begins to take shape in you. You cannot plan it. God simply gives you himself when he wants and how he wants. Now it is not you who pray, but God begins to pray within you. Saint Theresa writes,
"Everything that now takes place brings the greatest consolation, and so little labour is involved in that. Even if prayer continues for a long time, it never becomes wearisome, for the understanding is now working very gradually and is drawing very much more water than it drew from the well. The tears which God bestows here flow joyfully. Though the soul is conscious of them, it does nothing to induce them."
However, to make staying prayerful before God easier, just close your eyes. Imagine that you are heaven for God. You are not empty. Be like Mary carrying Jesus under her heart. Stay at the side of Jesus in the Garden of Olives when you are sad. Be together with the resurrected Jesus when you rejoice in your life. Try to match your meditations on Jesus' life to the state of your inner self. Do not be tense. Get some rest. Theresa herself writes,
"This is a kind of recollection which I believe is supernatural. There is no occasion to retire, nor to shut the eyes, nor does it depend on anything exterior. Involuntarily, the eyes suddenly close, and solitude is found. Without any labour of one's own, the temple of which I spoke is reared for the soul in which to pray. The senses and exterior surroundings appear to lose their hold, while the spirit gradually regains its lost sovereignty. Some say the soul enters into itself, others that it rises above itself."
What should such prayer be like in practice? Well, you sit with the Lord and abide in prayer. You are there and you are receiving. You simply are. You are simply present before him who is. You try to be passive, but not absolutely. If you feel an impulse to say a few words, follow it. If you feel resistance, it's better to give it up. Theresa explains,
"What the soul has to do at these seasons of quiet is merely go softly and make no noise. By noise, I mean going about with the understanding in search of many words and reflections with which to give thanks for this benefit, and piling up its sins and imperfections so as to make itself realise that it does not deserve it."
What else is important at this stage? Well, despite such beautiful touches of grace from God, your perseverance in prayer is still necessary because you have not yet reached your destination. The respite is not something permanent. The best attitude towards this gift of repose is gratitude. The open hands that receive the gift but remain open because the gift belongs to God. It is the awareness of the grandeur of the work that is taking place in you. In this way you pass from thinking to loving. And even if you use your mind, you do it so as to know more and to love more. By experiencing this form of prayer, a person begins to long for solitude, for seclusion, sees how much it bears fruit. And even though such escape into solitude may seem a little selfish, It is necessary as an important step on the way towards complete liberation from egoism. God attracts with the bait of rest and peace, so that afterward he can work on the soul in solitude. It's also good to know that the prayer of quiet is not a continuous state at the beginning of spiritual development. Usually this experience of repose is spread over days and years, and often in its intense form it remains unnoticeable. Still, if you feel a continual pull towards God, to abide with God, then even if you do not experience such intense rest in quiet, you still experience its effects. It may even be a prayer of dryness in the heart which, when consciously accepted and lived through, brings repose. But beware. The danger of this mansion lies in seeking rest and peace in the heart instead of God, or else seeking God only for the sake of peace and rest. That's why the subsequent mansion introduces you to a new kind of asceticism, the liberation of the soul from seeking consolations, supernatural tastes and touches. Repose has to teach you detachment from yourself. What are the fruits of this time? Well, at this stage God begins to act not only through thoughts, events or other people, but directly. Now, freely and effortlessly, a person stands in the presence of God and feels embraced by God. His desire for heaven becomes stronger, and his fear of damnation recedes. The love of the Son for God the Father grows, and the attitude of the servant disappears. Prayer is no longer a duty or a compulsion, but a living relationship with Jesus. Religious practices become less important than Jesus and his life. A person is no longer afraid of suffering, rather choosing it when it testifies to love for God. This person understands more and more the greatness of God, and consequently their own poverty and unworthiness. Having experienced God's sweetness, they realize that the goods of this world will not provide any satisfaction. In general, this person grows in the practice of all virtues, with development accelerating and deepening. There is a feeling of true freedom. Everything becomes pale in comparison with the Creator. This person's will, which was previously at a loss, now finally discovers its genuine purpose: to be one with the will of God, to love. The will begins to do what it always wanted to do, but it did not know about it, namely, to obey love. These are the fruits of this mansion. And no mystical phenomena are necessarily required to confirm the truth of this mansion. For supernatural phenomena are not essential on the way of a person to God. They cannot be either forced or earned. The unity with God grows through faith, hope and love, and the supernatural phenomena in a sense only confirm it, and only with some people. At this stage a person begins to taste how good the Lord is. The senses finally take their proper place in the exterior of the castle. They put a person in touch with the world, but they do not pull them to the outside. On the other hand, the inner senses, the spiritual ones, now wake up. That's why in the fourth mansion there is more talk about savouring than consolations, characteristic of the third mansion. What is the difference between them? Well, consolations come from a good deed that you have done. It's a bit like satisfaction with oneself. I tried and I succeeded. On the other hand, you receive savouring from God himself, who touches you with mystery, with himself, and brings indescribable peace, quiet and sweetness. This inner satisfaction comes straight from the source. The consolations affect you externally, the savours internally. You experience your depth. You see that it is a lot bigger than you thought. Your emptiness is filled up with the one who created you for fullness in God. Now you do not walk alone. You are no longer alone. You are carried by God in his rhythm, and what's interesting, you are perfectly conscious of it. You feel like a breastfed baby who does not even have to suckle on its own. You are on your guard about your whims, but submissive and passive before God, which means that you transmit and receive on God's frequencies. In this mansion, you reach the limits of your possibilities in the work on your relationship with God. Now the gratuitous work of God begins with the aim of bringing you to maturity. To sum up, the symbol of the fourth mansion is the spring. The state of a person in this mansion can be defined in terms of the discovery of God as gift. The person's response is the acceptance of God's graciousness and gratuitousness. His job is to learn how to receive it freely and with the right disposition. The prayer of the fourth mansion is rest in quiet and recollection, which is imbued within. Christ on the path of the fourth stage is the source and living water. And the biblical figures are the workers in the vineyard, hired at different hours.